Back again, Kickin Lawyer crew. Now we're going to talk about the second part of our police tactics little mini series here on levels of force. So again, before, just to briefly review, we covered the levels of resistance that a suspect might show a police officer that might justify them to escalate using actual physical force or other force. So now on the reciprocal side, we're going to cover what levels of force an officer might use depending on the level of resistance showed by a suspect. So we're going to cover an old style, the old policy, or what used to be the old standard, and is still kind of uniform probably in most of the nation, especially in smaller or older departments. There is a progression towards a new type of force continuum, or levels of control they call them, instead of levels of force, and I'll touch on both of those. But so based on the old levels of force by police officers, the first one is officer presence. And officer presence is the officer shows up. That used to be considered sort of a level of force, okay? And 90%, the statistics showed that roughly 90% of the population will respond to officer presence. That's why you see like unmanned patrol cars just sitting around, because most of the public will comply with the law when they see a cop. They see a cop car or whatever. Oh, we got to slow down or whatever. They don't buck up. The problem is that 10% is 90% of the 10% that's left is like 90% of what most cops deal with. And that's part of the reason too, just slight side note, why police officers get kind of jaded to what they're doing is the longer you do it, you got to remember they're dealing with maybe 10% segment of the population, but they're dealing with that 10% like 90% of the time. So a police officer's perspective eventually gets very skewed too. I know mine did. Over time, you don't trust anybody. You think everybody's lying to you. Often even includes your family. You bring the work home with you. You stop somebody's grandma and you're giving her the third degree because everybody lies to you. You're the police and you don't trust anybody. So anyway, that most of the population will respond to officer presence. The officer shows up. That's why they wear the nice uniforms. That's why it's important if you're the officer to look the part. You need to stay in shape. You need to work out. You need to look like a professional police officer, because that can help save you. There are studies that have showed that people have responded. There were guys that were going to fight and have fought police before, and during questioning, they basically stated that they didn't attack this officer because of the way he looked versus another officer. If you look professional, just like as an attorney, you need to look the part in order to get the results that you want. So to avoid those conflicts, if you're a police officer, try to look the part, man. Shine the boots. I know it sucks. Hated shining my boots. Keep your gun clean. Keep all the normal stuff that you got to do. Make sure your brass and everything's looking good. So officer presence is number one. The second level of force an officer may use is verbal commands. Hey, come here. Hey, stop. Let me see your ID, sir. Slow down, calm down. Show me your hands. Stop resisting. All these things are verbal commands that an officer may use, and they have a right to tell you to do certain things. If everybody's got a right to be free, but if an officer has a reasonable suspicion that something shady's going on, they have a right to do what they got to do. They're trying to protect the public. I have a disagreement with one of our partners sometimes because he has a different view on the police officer's role. He views them more as peacekeepers, just kind of stay out of the way, only come when bad stuff happens. But, part of your job is to ferret out crime. I mean, that's what an officer's supposed to do. That's what I want police officers to do. And in order to do that, you do have to interact with people, and sometimes you have to inconvenience them. That happens. I have clients all the time frustrated, and I tell them, look, they didn't give you a ticket. They didn't arrest you. Yeah, it took 15 minutes on the traffic stop. It inconvenienced you, but the officer's just doing their job. And if they didn't give you a ticket, pull you out, arrest you, whatever, I mean, come on. That's what they're supposed to do. But they have a right to give you verbal commands. So if it escalates from there and you don't comply with the verbal commands, the next level of force, if possible, is empty hand control. And that I'm not talking about punching and kicking. I'm talking about like joint locks, takedowns, restraint techniques, escort positions, things like that. Sort of soft empty hand control. And the next level would be hard empty hand control. And that's punches, kicks, and elbows, knees, and kicks and all that kind of stuff. So those two kind of go hand in hand, sort of two levels. You've got empty hand control, but it's really two parts, soft and hard empty hand control. Followed by that is usually intermediate weapon, and some departments spread it out in different levels. You got the taser, you've got the ASP baton, or we use an ASP brand baton, ASP baton. You could use the baton deployment. Canine technically is an accessory level of force in there, and then of course pepper spray. Everybody's favorite is back in the day was pepper spray. Very effective, by the way, if you've never been pepper sprayed. I have been sprayed and tased multiple times. Not cool, man. Not cool. Anyway, those would be your intermediate weapons. The last level of force for an officer to escalate to, and again, keep in mind, sometimes departments put different stuff in there. They might have like a canine force level that's different, or they might have like less lethal munitions or something in there too, but this is just sort of a basic overview of it. And then, of course, the last level would be deadly force, and that's where the officer uses whatever. If you're attacking me with deadly force yourself, you're trying to choke me or something, or laying on me, or you're bigger than me, I'll pull my pencil out and stab you in the face. I can do whatever I got to. It's not just shooting you. I'm going to do whatever I got to do to survive. I got 4 kids. Part of the reason I became a lawyer was try to take care of them. And, I love them, so I want to go home and see them again. And when I was a cop, I would do what was necessary in order to make sure I got to come home. And any cop's going to do that too. So the point on this is, like, there's a couple of videos that's been out where people got all upset because the suspect was killed. And, the loss of life is never good, no matter what. I don't care if it's the cop or the suspect. But, I mean, come on, people. If somebody is trying to grab a police officer's weapon, that is a deadly force assault. That cop can pull his gun out and blow that dude's head off, and it is completely legal. You can get mad about it all day, but the cop has got to do what he's got to do in order to go home. The answer to this is, how about you don't grab the cop's gun? I mean, come on, if you don't grab the cop's gun, I would say 99.999% of the time, he's not going to just pull the gun out and shoot you. Don't run away from the guy. You're not supposed to shoot somebody running away, but still, come on. Most of these videos that people are getting mad about, the suspect does something that's not exactly the normal response when police are around. Now, I have been a cop, and I'm around cops my whole life. My granddad was a cop, so my perspective may be a little skewed on this, okay? I'll give you that. But I've never had my kids or family or anybody, when the cops come up, that I started talking funky to them, or they did, or anything. Never had any trouble with the police, Now, sometimes they can be a little a-hole-ish just because the nature of the job makes them that way, when you interact with them for tickets and stuff. But let's just be smart here, people, okay? I know a lot of the people that may watch my videos, have been accused of a crime or whatnot, and I will defend you fervently. I don't know if you've noticed that from all the other videos, but I want to make it clear that at no point does anything justify you thinking that you can just buck up on the police. If they're not whipping you and threatening your life, which again I think rarely happens unless you bring it on, just comply with them. And if they're wrong about something, hire us, man. We'll tear them a new one. We've sued multiple police departments, county departments for screwing up, and then they pay you money. So don't be, and us too. So don't be the guy that makes it a harder and messier case because you decided to buck up. Comply, and then we can argue about it later. We can discuss it and figure out what we need to do. So those were the old school levels. The new school levels, they got terms like constructive authority, physical contact, where you like escort the person, physical force, canine force, accessory force, all that kind of stuff can be kind of split up. They have less lethal, deadly force. So your department may use different terms, but it's really usually a spin off of that old school one that I went over. As I told you on the last video, make sure you check your department policies before you try to use any force, and you damn sure better know your use of force policy before you face somebody like me in court, because I know that stuff upwards, downwards, sideways, and backwards. And if you don't know the terms, and you can't combat me with some mental judo that we're going to do when you're on the stand, you're going to look really bad. My goal, I got a lot of cops give me a little flack because I'm pretty rough on the cops, man, on the stand. But I've done your job. I know exactly what happens if you're a cop. I know you're exhausted at the end of the shift. I work midnights most of the time. I know you don't want to do the paperwork. But I'm telling you, that is probably one of the most important, other than going home. I mean, you got to go home. I always try to do 2 things. Arrive safely on the scene and make sure I go home. Even if I did something else, whatever. Those are the 2 main things. So once you get past those, Make sure you do your paperwork right, and then review it before court. When I was a cop, man, I hated going to court. Not because I had to testify, but it was usually inconvenient time and it seemed like it was a waste. But that's the whole point, man. If you're a cop, you need to step up and help the DA prosecute your case. If you do a good job, it makes it easier on me, really, because I don't have a lot to work with for my client. If you do a crappy job, well, then I'm going to make you look like an idiot. That's my job, and I'm going to be good at it, or at least attempt to be. So, if you're a police officer, you want to be a police officer, make sure you study your stuff and you do it right. If you're a civilian, I shouldn't say civilian because technically we're all civilians if we're not in the military, but if you're not a police officer and you interact with a police officer, just be a good person. Just be normal. Treat them right. Treat them with respect. You got to give respect to get respect, okay? And 99% of the time, I think you're going to be all right, okay? We don't have to have any of this craziness going all over the Facebook and YouTube and whatnot. But anyway, that's my spiel. This is getting long. My name is Jerry Mason. I'm the Kickin Lawyer. If you need anything, especially in our new jurisdictions of Louisiana, Tennessee, or Arkansas, just call one of the numbers below. Give me an email. Like and comment the video, please. Share it if you want, and let me know if there's something else you'd like to see. And again, if you're a police officer, be safe, like all you guys. But I'll tear you a new one if you ain't ready. See you later.